welcome back. This is Point on Pally, and welcome back to part 5 of the Making a Character Rig series. So, as I had stated in the previous video, I was going to kind of fast forward until all the tentacles were done. So the setup that we did on the first tentacle has now been done for the rest of them. So you can see they all have the individual icons with the same levels of controls that they had previously on them. And I will kind of give you a glimpse into what the blend shapes setup looks like here. So behold the tapestry that I have here. So I know this looks a little like overly organized. There's a reason for it. So it's difficult to set some things up like the joints and the deformers and things like that when the default position of the ribbon is on a curve. So what I ended up doing is straightening the ribbon. You see these have rotation values. Every single one of them has rotation values on them. So the important thing is I did not freeze transforms, because then that position would be the default position, and then the blend shape would now kind of snap to there and look like that. But if the values are still on it, then the blend shapes will work. So for perfect example, so if I were to, let's say, increase like the sine wave on this one, so you can see it's working just on that one. So the blend shapes are working. And so the reason I organized it this way is, one, it's a lot easier to set up the deformers and the joints and all that if the ribbon is straight. It makes it a lot easier, especially for things like the follicle setup for the squash and stretch and all that. Makes it a lot easier if it's built straight. Number two, I can kind of organize this into a nice viewpoint, so I can actually see all the blend shapes together. So when I set all of this up, I set it all up at the same time. So I'd work on the FK setup. I would start and I would build the FK setup for every single joint system, and I would do that with everything open here. Then I would move on to the sine waves, then I would go to the twists, the squash and stretch, and then the coiling setup. So this allowed me to kind of do everything all at once. And I will admit, a lot of this stuff had to be scripted out. So I had to code a lot of this out. So what I did is I just took basically everything I did for the center setup, and I scripted out as much as I could just to save time. And even then, it took me a while to get this all done. So that's a big part of why there is such a delay on this video between part 5 and part 4, is because I did have to set all of this up prior to doing this video. So that's pretty much the setup. So one thing I will point out, the way I got the ribbons to be perfectly straight like this, because they're based on like a straight plane. They were just kind of like rotated, and they used a nonlinear bend deformer to kind of get the overall position of the ribbon there. So it's pretty straight overall. So the way I got it into this position is when I duplicated, let's just say I'll duplicate the mesh here just to give you a quick glimpse. So I'll just move this out here in the open. So what I did for this is I took the closest two vert points, and I built just a 2-joint system based on that, just like that. So now the joint has the same orientation, and I snap it to the pivot point of the ribbon. So I go to the display local rotation axes, and that gives me a pivot point to snap the joint to, just like that. And at which point I would constrain the ribbon to the joint and then create a two joint system that's built straight like forward, and then just snap this joint system to the straight forward joint system, and it rotates the ribbon into place. And I also had to do that for all the deformers as well, because the deformers are based they are based on the orientation of the object. So the orientation of each deformer didn't line up with the how I wanted. I couldn't just rotate it down in a specific axis. I created a two joint system, snapped the deformer to it, and then rotated that joint system down 90 degrees. And that's kind of how I got the deformers all into the right place. Now, if you build the ribbon perfectly straight, you don't really have to worry about that. But if you built them on an angle like I did, that is something you're going to have to worry about. But overall, this came out pretty good. All right, and just to show you kind of how it all looks like together, I'm just going to select all these icons, and we'll use the sine wave handle because I think that'll show kind of how this will all look like together. Oops, sorry, I'm going to move it via the attribute. Or I can show time, that would help. You can kind of get a sense of how you can see how it's all moving together. Now, one thing I would point out here is, yes, they're all moving symmetrically. And what I'd like is a way to be able to offset those so they kind of move a little bit more independently of each other. And that's what we will be doing in this video, is we'll create a master control and to kind of control some of these deformers all together. And there we will have kind of an offset, so we can kind of offset all of this at once. So, but you can kind of get a sense of how everything is moving together right now. So with that, I think at this point, what we want to do is start connecting the tentacles to these bottom controls, or these bottom joints, because if I want kind of the walking hip setup that we talked about in the beginning, in the intro video to this series, that I wanted to try and see what it would look like if we kind of had these like quadrants of the bottom of the character kind of move almost like legs. This is one of those things where I want to test it to see if it looks halfway decent, to kind of give the animator the option of kind of moving the character that way, and B, I want to kind of try and show as much as I can in this series. So I want to push this rig as far as I can go to show you as much stuff as I can with this character. So I'm going to start constraining these tentacles, and we're going to just do kind of a joint constraint with these root controls here of the tentacle. Let's see how that goes. So, but the root ones here, I may just constrain this on a 1-to-1 to like the front here, and then these, there'll be kind of a variation. I think this one I'll constrain 1-to-1 here, and then a variation going forward, going to the other side. So what I'm going to do is to make this a lot easier to see. I'm going to select all these root controls here so I can take a look at them in the outliner. There we go. So at that point, I can just select it like this, and what I'm looking for are the main pads here. So I'm going to start by constraining this first pad. This is Tentacle 1, so I'll just constrain that on a 1-to-1. Make sure maintain offset. is on. I don't want it snapping there, obviously. And this is tentacle 5. I'll constrain to that joint on a 1-to-1. This is right tentacle 5. And right tentacle 1. Alright, and so the rest of these will constrain to multiple joints. So I'll select these two, and we'll go to left tentacle 2, and we hit parent constraint, maintain offset on, and what I'm going to do is set these values as a percentage basically. So I want this tentacle to follow that joint a lot more, so I'll set this to probably, we'll start with 0.75. Set the back one to 0.25. And we'll see how that looks when it's all done. So tentacle 3. This is just going to be 0.5 for both of them since it's basically right in the middle. And for tentacle 4. And we'll do this in reverse. So this is 0.25 and 0.75. So let's keep going. So left 6. And for the center tentacle, set this to 0.5. Now, obviously, there could be a variation with how many joints you have here. So yeah, I picked with 4 just because that made more sense. Because if I wanted to walk kind of like a quadruped, I would use 4 joints here. So it just made a lot more sense to do it this way. This is right tentacle 6. 0.75 and 0.25. Let's finish the remaining 3 here. And tentacle 3. And tentacle 4, last one. Alright, so now if we move these around, granted this is only a test bind. That's what these kind of big joints here are supposed to be doing. They're supposed to be kind of holding volume so you can see the tentacles working. So you can kind of see how it's all starting to move together. So you can kind of get what I'm going for here. So, this one can move in the back here. You can see how the tentacles are bending. You're getting a nice look there. And, once this is all like properly weighted, then you should be able to see, what this is all looking like. But you can kind of get a sense of it as we start with that here. But overall, looking pretty good, I'd say. So at this point, you can start making controls for the quadrant joints. So what controls to use here? So what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to use a pin control. So if you don't know what The pin control I kind of use like this. I like these because it allows you to see. This is an icon that will be visible for a joint that might be a little bit further into the geometry. So this would kind of allow you to have an icon, have it be connected to the joint, but you can see it outside. So with that all done, close that up, and we'll just group this control twice. And I'm just gonna, actually I'll just duplicate this 3 times. Hide those extra joints there. All right, so we can start parent constraining. So I'll select the quadrant joint, the control icon, yep. And we can do a parent constraint with maintain offset off. Do that for all of these. There we go. So at this point, we can delete these constraints, and then we can start rotating these icons into position. Let's start with the front left quadrant. What I'm going to do is just take this to 75 degrees, and then just kind of scale it up a little bit. So now you can see that control outside of the geometry, which is exactly what I want, because I don't want to put a control over here, because I mean you can clearly see this is getting a bit crazy with the amount of controls over here. So I don't want to add anything to that. So I'd rather have the controls stick out in the front where there really isn't much visible there. The back might be a little bit more of a pain, but we'll get to that in a second. We'll kind of test and see what works. So we just get 1.59. Get the same value here. Alright, so there's the right and the left controls for the fronts. There's transforms on these guys. Alright, let's do the back controls here. Now this, let's see how this is going to work. Let's see if I can get on an angle. If I scale it up, just like that. I think it might just be better doing it that way. Unfortunately, there's so many controls back here that this might just be the best way. You might just have to deal with it like this. 45. Scale values here. 2.15. Nice, easy number to deal with. All right. So what I might do in this case is I might actually flatten these out. Let's give that a shot. See how they look. Let's see how this works. Something like that. If I move them down a little bit. So I can't move them via the axis that way, but I want to make sure they stay flat. So I might just do these. There we go. Try and get them somewhere in the middle like that, so they're a little bit separate from the tentacle controls down here and the individual controls up there. Something like that. Perfect. And yeah, we'll be able to hide these controls for sure. Alright, so that looks good for now. So we'll get to naming. This will be left quad back icon. Left quad front. Right quad front and right quad. There we go. Let's name the pads and everything. Let's go through this as quick as we can. All right, and now we can constrain the joints to the icons. Maintain offset shouldn't matter at this point, but either way. There we go. Let's quick color these controls. All right, so now we have the control icons and they're moving the joints there. Looking good. And we have the tentacles following exactly the way we want. All right, so the next thing I want to do is I want to clean up these controls here for the quads, parent them directly underneath the center of gravity icon there. All right. So the next thing I want to do is I want to create a master control icon for the tentacles. What I want is to have a single control that has the ability to control most of the attributes on the individual icons, but with a single attribute. So I would have on the master control icon over here somewhere, I'd have one attribute that controls the tentacle bending for all of the tentacles at once. And I'd have one attribute to control the curl for all the tentacles at once. The sway, the twist. I have one attribute to control the sine wave attributes for each tentacle, for Z and Y, and to control the rolling coil setup as well. The squash and stretch, I don't think I really need to have a master control attribute for that, because those really fall under more individual level controls. So I don't think I really need them to be on the master control icon. That's more of a preference than anything. I just don't think I really need them. So we're just going to stick to the main setups for the tentacle bend, the FK, the sine waves, and the rolling coil. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate one of the individual controls here. I'm going to show the translates and rotates. I have a quick shelf button for that, but the easiest way to do that is edit, you go to channel control, and then you go find the translates, rotates, scales, and visibilities in the non-keyable hidden.
move them to keyable. So, but I have a quick button for that, so it makes it 10 times faster. So I'm just going to move this down to the grid point here, and rotate it, and we'll scale it up to a size we like. Let's make it a little bit smaller. There we go. I'm going to keep it there. I'm also going to have control for some of the like bottom, like the quadrant controls and things like that. I'm going to put over here, so that's why I'm moving it to the right side here. But for now, we're just going to stick with this control. So I'm going to call this CT Tent Master Icon. And then we're going to lock and hide the main attributes. So we're left with all these. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of the squash controls because I don't need those. The squash controls, there we go. I want to keep that FK icon visibility. So I'm going to delete those attributes. Now, these attributes that you see down here, because I didn't address it, what these are is on my channel, I uploaded a new video where I go through the coiling setup with the tentacles. I did a separate video. I took what I did basically in this series, but I made a couple of changes to it, and one of those changes is the values for the rotations of the joints for the coiling setup are all controlled through attributes now. Whereas before I did it with a hard-coded Python list. And the list of values I applied to the tentacle, at least for the center tentacle back here. But for the rest of them, I used the newer setup where I have attributes controlling them instead. So if you want to know how to do it that way, just go to that video. It should be one of the latest videos on my channel. So, but since this is the master icon, I don't need these. So we'll delete those attributes as well. So we're left with just this. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little bit of reordering of some attributes for this master icon before we get started making some connections. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a master attribute on the icon here that allows me to switch control between the individual level controls and the master icon controls. So what I'm going to do is, using my script, I'm going to make a master icon controls. I'll add that as a separator attribute down here. And then we're going to have just a simple Boolean attribute. And we'll call this master control. There we go. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use one of my scripts, and I'm going to start reordering some attributes here. So if you don't want to use the script, you'll have to remake all of these attributes yourself. But they will be the same basic attributes as the individual level controls. Excuse me. But the script that I have, which I also have on my channel of how to build it, it's the ability to reorder attributes. And to put it as basic as I can, what it does is I can reorder the attributes using this scroll list here, and when I reorder the attributes, it actually records the attribute, what type it is, and the min-max values if it has any, and then and also records any connections to any attributes, and and it saves all that information and then remakes the attributes in the order that I specified here. Again, I have a whole video on my channel about how to build this script, just because I think it's really helpful. So, but if you don't want to use the script, you would just have to remake the attributes yourself. So we'll bring master control icon and the master control attribute up here. And I'm also going to move this FK icon visibility attribute that I have at the bottom of each control. I'm just going to move this to the top where it belongs. And I'm also going to create two more attributes. These are specifically for the sine wave controls. I'm creating offset attributes, and I'll explain it when we actually get to that point, but what these attributes are going to do is allow me to adjust the initial starting position of the animation for the sine waves so that the tentacles will animate differently. It's just so we can get a little bit of variation so they're not moving in the exact same animation. So I'm going to create those real quick. I'm just going to call it offset Z and offset Y. Alright. I'm probably going to have to do this all over again. Yep. Alright, so that's quick. Oops. Make sure I stop at a certain point. There we go. There we go. Let's get the FK icon visibility, move that up to the top with the rest of the FK controls. And we'll take offset Z and we'll move it above the animation Z. And we'll take offset Y and move it above animation Y. So now that I click reorder attributes, now you can see the icons are all, the attributes are where I want them. I'll create a separator for the tentacle bend as well. So we'll call this tent bend separator. Reload the attributes and I'll move this up here. I really love this script. This is probably one of the most commonly used scripts I have. It is extremely helpful when it comes to reordering attributes because it's one of my least favorite things with Maya is that there is no ability to reorder the attributes. I've been asking for it for over a decade now and still haven't gotten it. So this script allows me to do that on my own. So now we've got the attributes in the order that we want. So we are all good there. So at this point, I'm going to add something, just a little extra thing, just so visibly I have some confirmation of what icon has control, whether it's the individual control or the master. So what I'm going to do is actually create some just like text curves and essentially convert the visibility and the color on and off. So actually let me create this and turn it to yellow. Alright, so if I go to create, type, it used to be text, but these days it is converted into this whole type shape. So I'm trying to remember how this actually worked. I'm going to create curves from type. There we go. So we're going to call this oops. Jeez. Call this doesn't want to work for me. So we'll call this indiv, and we'll create curves from type. Go back to the type mesh, and we'll call this master, create curves from type. So at this point, we can delete the individual ones, and now we have the two curves that we're looking for. So we'll start with the indiv curve. So really, we'll just leave it like this for right now, and then we'll eventually combine everything together. So what we're going to do is we're going to unparent these from the group, and we're going to do the process of combining curves into one object. So the way we do that is we create an empty group, we select the curves, and then we hit the down arrow. Now if you want to, just for the sake of consistency, knowing which curve is which, you can actually type it out. So we'll call this indiv I1 curve. You don't really have to do this, but when you combine it all, it shows up down here and you have no clue what curve is pointing to what. So you can do this if you want to. Let's do this really quick. Indiv D1. Call this indiv I2. This is I3. V, and D2. Now we got it all named. We can hit the down arrow, command click or control click the null group, and in the mel field down here we can type parent -r-s, and that's it. So now it's all combined into one single curve. Delete it. And now you can see we have the curve shapes here. So now you can see what everything is referring to. So the I1 curve shape, I know it's pointing to this one. So you don't have to do it, but it's just something I like to do just so I don't have a bunch of just random curve shapes in here that aren't named. So now that we've got that, I'll just call this indiv curve. We'll hide it. We'll do the same thing for the other one. We'll call this master M curve. This is A1, S, T, zoom out, this is E1, we got R, this is A2, and this should be E2. Alright, let's create that empty group. The icons, select the shapes, select the null group, and parent -r-s. There we go. So we'll call this master curve. Alright, so we have our two icons here. Center pivot on this. So at this point, I'm going to grid snap them right there. Rotate these down. And scale them down. Something like that. That works. What I'm actually going to do, I'm going to make this tentacle icon a bit bigger. Scale it up a little bit. Move it over. Just because when you zoom out on it, it looked rather small, so that at least this way, let's scale it up and make it a bit bigger. There we go. Let's lock and hide. We got the master, and we got the indiv. I'll move this one over to here. So essentially what I'm going to do is I want to set it up so that depending on whether the master control icon is on or off, it'll highlight one, and then the other one will become and then the other one will like turn into a gray color, just so you can clearly identify which one has priority. So I can say, like, if I'm opening the scene, all right, and I can say, all right, which control icon has priority? All right, the individual control is highlighted, it's turning yellow. I know that one is the correct control, or that one is the one that has control over the tentacles right now. So the way we can do this, I mean, there's probably 100 ways you can do this, but we're going to just bring these into the node editor real quick. And I specifically want these three. Let's remove all those shape nodes from there. So the first thing I want to do with these two is I want to make sure that I cannot select these. I want these here for visual only. So if I go to display, drawing overrides, enable overrides. Set it to template. Let me say something real quick. So if I set it to template, can I change the color and affect it? No. I'll do reference. Will that allow me? That won't work. So looks like we're going to have to keep it selectable. But in this case, we can just lock and hide anything. So basically say, like, all right, we can make it selectable. Like, it's selectable, but there's really nothing on it that is worth, dealing with. So let me turn normal on. Yeah, so you can select it, but there's nothing on it, so don't even worry about it. It's just there on a visual level only. All right, so in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to enable overrides on both of these. And what we want is maybe that this turns black, or like a gray color like that. I think that works a little bit better because that almost looks like the template that we had before. Speaking of which, let me make sure I lock and hide these as well. Oh, wait. Before I do that, one thing I gotta make sure of. Freeze transforms, and that all three of these are under the master control icon. Right now, this icon as well is under the center of gravity. So I want to make sure these are under the master control icon, just like that. So if I go up on this, yep, master control icon. Okay. So now I can select all three of these and lock and hide the main attributes there. All right, perfect. All right, so where were we? All right, so I want to make a point of which tick on the line this is. So 1, 2, 3. That's 2. Oh, 2 is even better. Okay. So 0, 1, 2. Perfect. And I know the yellow is 17. So that's just something that's been ingrained into my head for so long, thanks to Python scripting. I know the yellow is 17, so I want to fluctuate between 17 and 2. So the easiest way to do that is to use a set range node. We'll set this to let's call this CT master tent. Doesn't really matter what the name is. Viz set range. And so we'll take this master control attribute and we're going to plug it into the value x and the value z. So now that I have the attributes plugged in, we need to start setting some values. So I want to set old max for x and z to 1 because that is it's a Boolean attribute, so it is 0 to 1. And so what I'm going to do is set the values for the colors. So let's say I'll make X for the master and Z for the indiv. So what I'm going to do is set the min X for this is 0, and the max X is 17 because that is the color of the yellow. And for Z, what I'm going to do is set the min Z to 2 and the max Z to 0. So that should do it. Well, let's see how this works. Let me just test this. So I'll plug it in the master curve. So I'll set the out value X into the drawing override color. Now to do that, I need to right click on the attribute and show all attributes. And I need to bring this up, bring this down to the overrides. Where are those overrides? Drawing overrides, there it is. So override color. So let's plug out value X and see what we get here. Oh wait, never mind. I want the max. That's right. All right, so let's set that. So 17 and 2. There we go. So these are the numbers. So I was thinking I'm just used to having it in a different way, but what I want is for the color to be 2 for the min and yellow for the max, and then flip it for the Z. So there we go. So let's do the same thing here and plug out value Z. There we go. Drawing overrides into override color. All right, so it's set to off. So the indiv is highlighted to yellow. So if I set it to 1, it flips. Perfect. So that is exactly what we want to see here out of the icon. So just to review, the min-max here was set for 0 to 1 because that is the Boolean values. It's 0 to 1. And so for the X, which is the master control here, we set the min to 2 so that when this is off, it'll be that gray color. And the max to 17, so when it's on, it's set to yellow. And we just flip those values on the Z here for the other control. And so now we've got that all set up. Okay, so now visually we're able to tell what we've got set up here. So even from afar we can see what it's looking like. So at this point we can actually start to make the connections here. So first we have to find the right attributes for those connections. So I'm going to select the individual control for the first icon here. And we're going to go into the node editor. And we're going to show all connections. Now there's a lot here, but what we're looking for is we're going to start with the tentacle bend attributes. So right down here. So I can see the connections here. Oops. And I accidentally disconnected it. Of course I did. Oh, good. Alright, well let's check the other attribute just to see. It's really running slow right now. Okay. So this looks like the one. Because it's connected to the other one. Okay. So let's clear it and redo the connections. Oh, good. I undid that connection, but it wasn't showing it because the node editor was running really slow right now. But either way, so we've got the right node here, and this is perfect because I only have to deal with one node, so this will be really good to show. So I'm going to move all this over. So what I want to do here is I need to create a node that will switch control based on what I have this attribute set to. And the easiest way to do that, in this case, is with a blend colors node. I mean, you can use just about any node. You can use a set range node, you can use a condition node, but to me, blend colors node is probably the one to use. And since I don't have really any blend colors nodes in this rig setup so far, this will kind of let me know that what this node is specifically being used for is that switch. Because the blend colors node is perfect because I have two sets of attributes for RGB and then a blender. And the best part is we can take that master control attribute and plug that directly into the blender, since the blender is a 0 to 1 value. So I'm going to add this node in. So I'm going to take that master control attribute and plug it directly into the blender. So we can switch it on and off. And what I'm going to call this is, I'm going to call this left tent 1 bend master add, or master switch. There we go. So this lets me know exactly what that it is the master switch node, what we're dealing with, and what tentacle we're dealing with it on. So at this point, I only need to deal with two attributes, the tentacle bend and the tentacle in between bend. So now it's important to know to point out which one is specifically working or which color you're specifically plugging it into. Because I always get these screwed up. But when the blender is set to 0, you're working with color 2, I believe. So let me double check that just to make sure. So I'm going to plug, so if this is off, then I want the individual control to have priority. So let's plug this into the R and the B of input 2. Or color 2, I believe. There we go. Now, just to test it, just to make sure, I'm going to bring in a quick multiply divide node just to make sure we are connecting into the right thing. If I do output R, so the value is 10, which means the 10 is active. So yeah, color 2 is what we need to set when the blender's at 0. So now that we've got the right attributes connected here, we can get rid of that multiply divide. Now we can plug the master control attributes into the color 1. So we want tentacle bend into color 1R and the in-between bend into color 1B. And now we can plug these into the outputs we can plug into the value X of the Tentacle 1 set range. So let's test it just to make sure it works. So the tentacle bend is off. So let's say if I flip this to 1. So now the master icon control has effect. So you can see the bend isn't active here. But if I turn this to 10, now we got the bend. Perfect. So just to make sure, let's turn this back off and flip the control back to the individual. The tentacle bend is active there, so we should get the bend. And if I turn this off, there we go. So it looks like we have the control set up for the, oops, jeez, let's grab that. There we go. So we have the master control icon switch set up. So now, really all we have to do is just use this for every single connection for this individual icon. So let's go into the set-driven keys. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this setup just for the one tentacle, and then I'll just kind of fast forward through the rest of them. So now that we've got that set up, I'm going to copy the name. But let's clear this out and re-show all of this. So now I want to deal with the twist, sway, and the curl. So let's see what I'm looking at. I'm looking for set-driven keys. So I've got the curl. I'll follow the connection. Oh, I've got the connections right here. So there's one way I can go about doing this. I could either just manually do the set-driven keys again, or what I could do is literally have the same connection. Set-driven keys might work a little bit differently. What I want to do, let's test this out. For starters, select all these and just clear this and redo the connections. All right, so this is what we need here. And like before, let's bring in the master control icon. And let's get that blend colors node. It's a good thing I saved the name here. So this is left tent 1 FK master switch. So same thing as before. Let's bring the master control icon into the blender. We got to remember before that the master control icon goes into color 1. So we want curl, sway into 1G, and twist into 1B. Let's do the same for this one, for the individual control. Sway and twist. There we go. So let's plug the output in here and see what kind of results we get. I'm actually curious if this is actually going to work. So the twist is the rotate X attribute. So the twist would go into the input here. And I'm very curious if this is actually going to work. Set-driven keys are usually fine if you like do set-driven keys on top of each other. They create blend nodes and they blend them together. But I'm genuinely curious if this will work. Let's rotate Y. Alright, let's bring it down here. Set these all up. Alright, so rotate X into here. It's into here. Rotate Y into here. Let's rotate X. Rotate Z. And rotate Y. Alright, so as we did before with the tentacle bend, let's test this just to make sure it works. So this should automatically work for the curl. Okay. With the curl, we got the sway, we got the twist. Okay. Now, let's turn the master control icon on. Let's see what we get. Curl, sway, and twist. Excellent. So let me just test it. So it doesn't actually work when the individual control is on. That's perfect. Okay. So that's exactly what I want to see here. The setup is working. Oh, that's interesting. So you don't actually have to do the set-driven key again. The node connection actually works. Fantastic. All right, so that's another setup down. So we can move on to the next one. And let's actually do the coil. I want to do the sine setup last. So let's do the coil first. So what we need is, let's do the roll up, down, and side to side. So that's, and the turn coil, we're going to need those 3 attributes. So like we did before, let's clear it out. Let's open this up. All right, let's find those attributes. So this is the one that's going to probably take a little bit, and what I'll do is I'll skip forward on this one because there were a lot of nodes to deal with on this one. Because we had set ranges for every single one, along with plus minus average nodes. So what I'm going to do, we don't actually need the plus minus average nodes because those are for the individual like rotation values here, and we want to keep those as is, so I don't actually want to mess with those at all. But it's the roll up, down, and side to side, and the turn coil as well. So there's a lot here. Let's see if we can grab it all. All right. Okay, so I think we got all of those. Grab that one. Oh no, it's squash. Alright, and I think the rest of them down here. Rolls. Let's keep going. Or, you know, it actually might make sense at this point. Yeah, well, let's keep going. Or, here, let's try this. We'll do left, 10, 1, oops, lowercase so. Left, 10, 1, roll. Let's try that. There we go. Still quite a bit here. And because it also included all the joints and all that wonderful stuff. And boy, do I not like this tapestry, but this is probably what we're going to have to deal with. That's the other thing, is I don't want any of these plus minus average nodes. Let me try and get as many of these out as I can. Yeah, this is probably a little hectic here, but I wanted to set the individual tentacles up first before I wanted to bring in the master control. Normally you would have the master control as part of this whole setup and you would include that as part of everything you do, but I wanted to kind of at least show you something. And outside of this, it really, the master control icon shouldn't be that much of an issue, but you know, I want to try and clear out as much of this as I can. Alright, close enough. So the idea is I want to get all the set ranges back to what I just want to get the set ranges. I want to get the ones that are connected to specifically these two attributes. Let's try and get these by themselves. That's one thing that's really annoying about the node editor. Alright, two more set ranges right here. One right here, and this will be way more hectic for the other tentacles because they have way more connections on them because they have more joints. The first tentacle only has, I believe, 10 joints on them, or at least for the coiling setup, it does. All right, let's get all of this. I think we got all of them now. So at this point, we can hide everything else, it seems like. All right. Looks like we have a couple more set ranges in here. Okay. All right. Get rid of all this. So we're left with just the really important stuff. I think this should be all of them. All right. Either way, at this point, all we really need to do is plug the blend colors into the values here. So let's get the master control icon back in here. Master control icon into the blender, and we want roll side to side and roll up down. Put this into B. And same thing here, roll side to side. Actually, I'll plug these. Roll up down, so that comes first. And roll side to side, and then the turn coil attribute there, just like it is in the attributes on the channel box. The individual on the color 2, roll up down, roll side to side, turn coil. Alright, let's rename this. So this is the roll master switch. Alright, so now that we have it named, we can plug the outputs. So what makes sense to me at this point is to script this all out, because at this point all I would really need to do is for the roll Y set ranges to plug the color or the output G into both of these, and for the roll Z set ranges to plug the output R into the values, and for the turn coil to plug the output be? Now, as you can imagine, there are a lot of nodes here, so I could go through the process of doing all that. However, it's going to take a long time, and you kind of get the idea of what I'm doing. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm just going to try and script this all out and to make this go a lot faster. So I'll just fast forward to when I got the script, and I'll show you it running, and it should do all of the connections, and then I'll edit the script so that it can do it for all the tentacles. So that'll be a lot easier to do than trying to do all of this one at a time. So let's get the script going, and then we'll move forward. All right, so I've got the script all ready to go. That's going to do all these connections. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is actually I'm going to delete this blend colors node, because the script I have now makes the blend colors node. So here we have the script right here. Oops, scroll down a little bit. There we go. So master node replacement, or master switch node replacement. So all this is doing is it's creating the shading node, it's listing the connections of both the node and the attribute it's connected to those specific 3 attributes that we're working with. And then after that, it connects the blend colors node to those attributes in the correct way. And then we force connections on all the connected nodes and their attributes. So that's really all it is. So I'm just going to select the node here and run this script and enter. And there you go. So now you see nothing is actually running through these 2 attributes anymore. They're all funneled into this blend colors node, and this blend colors node is connected to all the other nodes that we need for the coiling setup. So a lot faster way, and we'll implement this into how we script the rest of the tentacles, because then we won't just do for the rolling setup, we'll also do that for the FK and everything else. So now let's just test it just to make sure everything is working. So if I turn on the master control and we coil it, there we go. So we got our coiling set up. Let's check side to side. Looks good. Let's check the turning of the coil. That looks good as well. So, and if I check it on the individual control, it should no longer be working. There, very good. All right, so we've got the tentacle bend, we've got the FK, and we've got the rolling setup. So all that's left to do at this point is the sine wave controls. So just as we did before, I'm going to select the main individual control here, redo the connections, or reshow the connections, and at this point we are looking for the sine wave. So we'll start with the amplitude. Sine Y and sine Z. So we've got these 2, and it looks like it's running the frequency and the amplitude. So at this point we need the animation switch, which are these right here. Perfect. And we just need the fall off. We gotta find those. Scroll all the way down. There it is. There's the fall off Z, and now we just need the fall off Y. And there they are for that. Okay, so we've got all the nodes we need. For this setup. So we need these 5, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right. Okay. So this should be everything that we need for the sine waves. So these are the 3 animation conditions. That all looks good. And I need these set ranges. 1, 2. Okay, so these are the 5 nodes that we need. Let's get those set keys as well. Okay, so we've got everything we need at this point right here. And this setup is going to be pretty similar to what we've been doing. For the most part, it is, again, just blend colors nodes for these attributes. The only difference is the offset. Now, you probably remember that when I created the master control icon, I added some offset attributes to them. So we'll go over that and what they're doing there. So the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to create the blend colors nodes for the switch attribute here. So we'll call this, since we're going to need 2 of these, we'll call this left tent1 sine master switch 1. Alright, so same as we did before, master control goes into the blender. And in this case, we're going to, for this one specifically, we're just going to deal with the animation for now. So animation Y goes into R, animation Z goes into G, and the animation switch attribute goes into B. So let's do the same thing over here. This goes into color 2. All right. Okay, so now let's plug this into here. So C goes into R here, here, and the animation switch goes into the first term. Oops. Didn't want to do that. That's color 1. I wanted to do that here. So let's try that again. And the other one, we need just the animation switch for this one. Okay. And then these get funneled into a plus minus average node. And here is where we are going to deal with that offset attribute that we created. So the idea of the offset attribute here is designed to adjust the timing of the animation, or essentially the start point of the animation. And what that is going to do is it's going to provide a little bit of variation in the animation of each tentacle. Because right now, if I activate all the sine blend shapes here, it's going to all move in perfect symmetry, which is not natural. There is going to be some slight variation here or there with the animation. So what I wanted to do is create one attribute that adjusts the position of each animation so that they all move a little bit differently. So that is what we're going to do here. And the way we do that is with this plus minus average node right here. Because what this is doing is it's combining the animation values here, but really it's only going to activate one at a time because it's set up on a condition. So it's only one of these is going to be active at once. But what I'm going to do is use this input 1D3 here, and this is where I'm going to add the value. And what that value is can be kind of up to you, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to increment the value. So all I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a value of 1 here that we can control with this offset attribute. And for the second tentacle, I'm going to add 2. The third tentacle here, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, and so on. And what I will also do is add 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 for the tentacles over here, just so that we can get variation, so that the variation isn't the same on both sides. So that is the idea here. Hold on. Excuse me. So what we need to do that is a set range node. Yet another set range node. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug the offset Y and offset Z into this set range node. There we go. And I'll call this left tent 1 sine switch, or I'll just call this sine offset set range. There we go. Alright, and since I have those values connected in, the min of the attributes was 0 and the max was 10. And what I want to set the max to for each of these is to 1. And that's really it. And from here, I can plug these directly into the set range here. So this is the Y switch. I want to make sure I use the Y attribute, which, just checking, I plugged into value Y here. So I want to make sure it's Y to 1D3. There we go. Let's find that other Plus minus average, there it is. And we'll plug the out value x into the 1D3 here. There we go. So, to make sure that it's working, if I turn the offset z here to 10, if I look at this node here, we should see a value of 1 added. Perfect. And if I activate this, let's see, is this on? Okay. So if I activate the amplitude here, let's turn the offset off. So, and let's turn on the frequency. Oh, that's right, I didn't do that for that. That's still on the individual control. I haven't created that blend colors yet. So if I turn on the amplitude here, and let's switch this to attribute, or either way. So if I hit play, oh, it is set to attribute. So if I set it, so if I move the attribute, you see it's moving just fine. So when I hit the offset, you'll see what happens. So all it really does is it adjusts the position of the animation ever so slightly. Now, truth be told, I could probably just set this to 1, and it will do the exact same thing I want it to do, because it'll just increment that value to each of these. So, you know, you could set it to a 0 to 1 if you want. I just typically use 0 to 10, just because that's what I do. But that's all it's really designed to do. Just adjust the position, the start position of the animation by 1. And so you'll see that effect once we get that going on all of the tentacles. So last thing we need to do is the next blend colors for these two set ranges to control amplitude and frequency. So I'm just going to duplicate this blend colors. We'll call this master switch 2 blend colors. And from here, we will probably need one more because there's 2 attributes for each of them, so I'll just split those up into a new one. So we'll call this master switch 3. Alright, there we go. So I'll start with the Z value on this one. So amplitude Z goes into color 1. I'll make sure we do the master control for each of these into the blender. And amplitude Y goes into the next one here. So next we got frequency Z, the color 1B here, and frequency Y, color 1B down here. So let's do the same for the individual. So we got amplitude Z, the color 2, and frequency Z in the color 2B. Amplitude Y, and frequency Y. There we go. So at this point we can start connecting these into the set range nodes, and that should be it for the sine waves. So R, just double check. So frequency goes into value Y. Okay. So R goes into B, and B goes into B. Thing, R into X, and B into Y. Alright, so that should do it. So now I should be able to, with the master control icon active, I can up the amplitude Increase the frequency a little bit. And there we go. I can also offset it. Perfect. All right. So we've got the sine waves done. We just check these for take the animation here. There we go. So you can see they're both working there. Oh, and the last thing we need to do is the fall off. So we need 2 more blend color nodes here. So we'll call this 5. We'll call this one 4. Oh wait, we don't need the extra one. It's just one attribute. All right. So same as before, master control into the blender. And we got fall off Z, color one R, and fall off Y into color one B. Same thing here. Oh, wait a minute. These have an extra attribute. All right, let's just use these. Never mind. Let's save some space here. So fall off Z, I'll put into color 1G here. And same thing here for 2G. And fall off Y. And fall off Y. Alright, so these are the Z ones. That means the output G here goes into the input of each of these. And the output G will go into these here. Alright, so output G. And output G. There we go. So now the fall off for both of these. There you go. All right. So this looks pretty much all set up. Looking good. So at that point, we've got all the attributes that we wanted to connect into the first tentacle here. So obviously we've got all the other tentacles to do. So what I'm going to do is script the rest of it out, and I'll come back when it's all said and done, and then we can move forward to the rest of the lower body here. All right, so we're back. We have completed the scripting for the rest of the tentacles. So if you want to take a look, I can show you the script that I used. So this is a bit clunky, but you know, I was more so interested in getting this finished than trying to make this a little bit cleaner. But essentially I have each setup done here. I've listed connections similar to what the script we just did for the rolling setup, but I list the connections connected to each attribute, create the blend colors node, connect everything into the blend colors node, and then connect that out into the specific attributes. Now, if there's only one attribute connected to, if there's only one thing connected to each attribute, then I just have the bracket 0 after. But if there are multiple attributes connected, like here with the FK, then I have it running through a loop to connect it to each attribute. But I have it here for the FK, the roll, the sine wave, for all the sine wave stuff. So that's pretty much the entirety of the script. So I've already applied the script, so it's all done. So now you can take a look at what I've got. So you can see we now have the curl working. So here are all the FK controls. There's the twist. We have the roll set up. So you can see that all coils up just like that. Now the weighting is it's just a test bind, so it's obviously not going to look like that once we're really getting into the weighting. But that's what it looks like for right now. And most importantly, here we have the sine wave. So let me activate the sine wave here. Now let me turn off the offset for right now. So I have it set to the timeline. So if I activate the timeline, you see we've got the sine wave. So it looks pretty good. This is, I will say this is running much faster than using the expression. Now the expression moves a little bit differently, but other than that, I like this method a lot because it does run quite a bit faster on the timeline than the advanced expression. But more importantly, I wanted to show what the offset is doing here. So right now the offset is set to off, and you saw everything is kind of moving in perfect symmetry here. Well, here's what happens if I turn on the offset. So just activating it just a little bit. If I push it even further. So now you can see we're getting some variation in the movement. It's not running all at the same time. So that's pretty nice if you ask me. So I can move these a little bit. And we're getting some kind of unique movement here, some organic movement, as opposed to everything moving in perfect symmetry. And that's all I really wanted to do here. So, like the results that we've gotten from everything here, so at this point I can almost declare the tentacles done. There's still a little bit more there's still one more thing I want to tackle with that. But I want to tackle one thing on the lower body before we tackle the last thing I want to do with the tentacles.